Thank you very much for the introduction. It's nice to be back. For those who you don't know, I was also here in the 1970s heading up the climate change research at the time within the Energy Project. So in many respects, now, 39 years later, since I first came to EASA, I'm going full circle. I'm going to come back to the climate theme during my talk because I'm going to use it as an example. And the two framing talks gave me a great start. They provided you with a lot of the words that I'm also going to use, transformative being one of them, transformations, and of course the systems approaches. There we go. Okay. Before I go into details, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues in the Impressions Project, which I'm going to talk about, and especially David Tabara. A lot of the thinking that I've been doing in the last 2 or 3 years on this set of issues comes from very intense discussions with those colleagues. So if the title of the talk is Methodological Advances, I'll start by saying that, I think you heard it already really, that these complex and obviously persistent problems of unsustainability require new approaches and new tools. And finding and testing and implementing and experimenting with solutions require participatory approaches. We need to involve more than just the science community in that process of finding, testing, and implementing. Science is one of the knowledge holders, but there are many others who know about these solutions. The Impressions Project, funded by the European Commission, started 2 years ago. It's got 3 more years to go, so we're getting towards the middle point, but we've still got 3 years to go. And the idea is to look at high-end climate and socio-economic scenarios. So high-end climate change could be defined as anything that is beyond the 2 degrees that Naki was talking about earlier. But certainly high-end if we talk about what happens if we get 6 degrees warming and not 2 degrees warming. And the project is looking also at how to use the knowledge to produce integrated strategies. Again, the words integration and strategies have already come up. And the premise behind a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about high-end climate change and high-end socio-economic change is that existing modeling tools, existing methods often fail to account for things like tipping points, the need to cope with radical change rather than gradual change, the complex interactions that we see between sectors, the synergies and the trade-offs between different ways that we can achieve goals, and between what we do to adapt and what we do to mitigate or reduce emissions. The project spent a lot of time talking about one of the words that I used in the title of the talk. What do we mean by transformative? I'm not talking about transformation. I'm talking about transformative research. Research that can support transformations. And I could spend probably the rest of the time allotted to me going through all of these distinctions that we have made between conventional, the way we usually do things and often do things, and transformative. But I want to show you some other things, so I just highlighted 3 points here. But if you look at the kinds of dimensions we were talking about, a lot of them use the word system, system of systems, systems representation, system attainability. So in terms of methodological advances, a lot of them are indeed related to systems analysis and the use of systems thinking in what we do. But in those 3 that I've highlighted, institutional change is something that is not well treated in conventional work and that is crucial to be included in transformative research. A basic assumption on system attainability differs strongly between the conventional ideas that we could still keep the present system. We can do some adaptation, we can do a bit of mitigation, and we can get back to the system that we had. Whereas the transformative approaches are saying, no, the present system is no longer attainable. We've gone beyond there, and we're moving into a different system. And then something I'll emphasize later on is the idea that visions and values not often included in conventional approaches and very crucial for triggering and orienting transformations, so in transformative approaches. So transformative climate science, I would argue, very much in line with what IASA is doing in terms of focusing on solutions and not on problems, integrating motives, values, human nature, agency, focusing on deep causes and not just symptoms. So really going the layer below what we see on the surface to see what the underlying causes are and what the socio-ecological interactions are that underlie the patterns that we see. Linking local and situated, integrated solutions of multiple problems to global processes. That's almost another of those definitions of system analysis. Coordinating global systems of solutions to support sustainable development, something that was also discussed earlier this morning, but that there are scale levels in this that need to be coordinated. For me, transformative is very much focused on empowering actors to change, hence the participatory nature of what I will talk about, and helping to distribute rights and responsibilities. Who needs to do what for the transformation? Who's responsible for what parts of transformation? What institutional change needs to take place? And where is the behavioral change necessary? Did I go over one there? Right? No. So moving back to the Impressions Project to give you some examples of things that we need if we're going to work as sort of transformative climate researchers. The first one is the idea of integrated scenarios. Not new for many people who've worked at IASA, but in particular because it's really important to know about socioeconomic change in the future and what kind of socioeconomic future we might be living in. Climate change will always be interacting with continuing socioeconomic change, with political changes, and this happens in potentially complex and non-additive ways. We have, on the one hand, a whole set of new so-called shared socioeconomic pathways provided to the international community, so a standard global set of socioeconomic scenarios to cover a wider range of uncertainties than the scenarios that were used in earlier work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. For us within the Impressions Project, a big challenge is how to actually downscale those and make them useful for people in a case study environment, and a case study from the regional scale down to a municipality. So it's a methodological challenge of doing that, doing it in a participatory way, and doing it in a way that we can also, at the end, sort of link back to the global level. On the other hand, we need to integrate what we know about how socioeconomic developments could be, the socioeconomic scenarios, to potential climate developments. So producing an integrated scenario that shows how climate could change and how the socioeconomic development could change up until the year 2100, to provide the context within which future decisions on mitigation on the one hand and adaptation on the other have to be developed and implemented. So we do a lot of this kind of downscaling of socioeconomic scenarios, integrating climate with stakeholders in a very carefully designed process and in an iterative process. And I think, from the examples that we've done so far of working with stakeholders to take a global story and ask them, so what does it look like in Scotland, for example, is extremely enlightening, both to them and to us. But we don't just need scenarios. Scenarios tell us what could happen. And what we need to know is, where do we want to go? Not just what could happen, but what is our vision? What is the end point that we want to achieve? And there, this is very much along an axis of system sustainability. The vision is for a sustainable system, and working with stakeholders to, within the context of a particular scenario, figure out how could we achieve that vision. And we could achieve bits of that, get halfway there or a third of the way there using conventional adaptation plus mitigation. But to achieve an ambitious vision of system sustainability in the year 2100, we're talking about transformative adaptation and mitigation. In addition, we can see that some socioeconomic scenarios would tell us the world is going to become very sustainable. There's going to be a lot of transformation within the system. The sustainability socioeconomic pathway is one that would get us quite a long way towards a vision of system sustainability. Nevertheless, if we have a socioeconomic development of this kind of sustainability pathway and impose on it a moderate climate change, the RCP 4.5 for those who know what RCPs are. If we take a sustainability socio-economic combined with a moderate climate scenario, we still find by using vulnerability assessment that we will have problems to address in the bottom corner there. The Iberian Peninsula, the Mediterranean areas, for example, in Europe, would still be extremely vulnerable. If we're developing those pathways, and we're talking maybe about conventional pathways and then how we can transform to achieve the vision, we can talk about individual actions to achieve the vision. We can talk about strategies, bundles of actions to achieve the vision. And we can talk then about the pathways, so time-dependent sets of strategies. All of that needs a lot of A, process design, and B, input from the science community on how to design those actions and strategies to put together. It needs participatory backcasting, and it needs the support of modeling, some conventional kinds of modeling, but also some agent-based modeling, and then also robustness testing. And the assessment of the pathways, figuring out, are these pathways actually going to help us achieve the vision that we have of system sustainability, still heavily relies on traditional cost-benefits analysis and variants of that and conventional methods. For high-end scenarios, as we have found by doing a very detailed study, the advantage, the numerical clarity of classical methods is, to quote, especially and unusually misleading. Within high-end scenarios, with the non-linearities, the complexities, the potential tipping points, we find that conventional tools are not useful. So we've been investigating, and again, this is an area where there are some advances recently, but there's still a lot to do in terms of methodological development and using those methods. So looking at how to involve the stakeholders in selecting indicators for assessing the pathways, helping the selection of criteria by looking at a number of aspects and not just whether they give us a nice clear number. And focusing on capacities. Do I have the capacity to adapt? Do I have the capacity to mitigate? Do I have the capacity to transform? Do I have strategic capacity to cooperate in the way that is necessary? All of these are things that have to be woven in now rather than using conventional approaches to analyzing potential pathways. So linking to the work on adaptive capacity and transformative capacity. At the same time, the more you work with stakeholders and the more you are addressing things like high-end climate change, you have to ask yourself, how do I avoid falling back into the old kind of linear thinking and help the stakeholders get away from that? So making the stakeholders aware of the possible non-linearities in the system in an exciting, interesting way. The idea is, in our case for the Impressions Project, is to confront them with a whole set of wildcards, and that in itself has been a really challenging thing, to find wildcards that are independent of your socio-economic and climate scenarios that you can introduce to the stakeholders and say, if this happened, what would your vision, would your pathways be robust? Could they cope? If not, what do we have to do? So again, something that needs preparation, validation, and some serious process design aspects. So in summary, if I take the example of one project that I'm working on right now, it's not the only project, but I thought I'd use one example. We need these new methods to work with stakeholders in finding solutions to persistent problems of sustainability. Place-based, i.e. somehow downscaled to a level that is of interest to the stakeholders. Place-based integrated scenarios provide the context for that discussion about solutions. The long-term vision provides the goal, and the assessment of integrated pathways needs new tools. Many of the results will be qualitative, not quantitative. We will probably end up with multiple narratives at multiple but linked scales on how to move forward towards a long-term vision of system-wide sustainability and on building capacities. And central to all of this are learning and empowerment. Thank you.